All right, it is Thursday, November 11th, Council Club. Once again, it's Veterans Day. That is what last Tuesday's meeting started out with, a proclamation and just comments from Vinnie Palermo. I guess it wasn't an official proclamation, but made some mention about Veterans Day. My 2 cents on Veterans Day, let's take care of the ones that we've already created and quit making more of them. All right, moving right along. So I don't know if anybody was there. I do know someone was there, and it was Mark, and he was awesome. But as usual, we kind of, we camp out in the back row and watch what's happening and try to sometimes catch people's ear or eye or whatever. And we had an interesting exchange with Don Seaton, which if any of you watch city council meetings, he's there all the time presenting on different planning projects and TIF projects generally, and all sorts of stuff. So we actually noticed.
Yeah, it started on, I'm on the Nextdoor app, and it's usually, I kind of just go on there, mainly when there's a lost dog. That's actually a really good app. If you lose a dog, check Nextdoor, or if you see a lost dog or whatever. Anyway, so I'm on Nextdoor and I see Don Seaton. And the way Nextdoor works, you only see posts within like I think it's a 5-mile radius. But he was commenting about his car got vandalized, and he said he's over on 40 in the neighborhood near Benson High School. And so I don't know, something about seeing Don Seaton on Nextdoor. It's like it was noteworthy. So when we saw Don Seaton at City Hall, Sarah actually chimed in.
I always am looking for reasons to talk to strangers, and I'm like, hey, Don Seaton, you live in our neighborhood. Sorry about your car. And he's like, oh, hey, who are you? Weirdos sitting in the back wondering what's happening. Anyway, he's like, what project are you here for? I was like, oh, we're not here for a project. Like, we're here almost every week, just being the cool kids with nothing better to do. He's like, oh, okay, interesting. And then the Blackstone TIF thing came up, which I guess we're jumping around, but it is what it is. So there was I believe it was only like $515,000 TIF request on the Blackstone. It was like kind of a smaller TIF project, but I'm just so flippin' sick of Blackstone being considered blighted. And I was like, all right, I rarely have like prepared thoughts. I just kind of go up and, wing it. But I was pretty much wanted to make the point that also Larry made, which I was concerned about agreeing with Larry, but whatever. He was talking about how this is like, why is Blackstone still considered blighted? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes. And he brought up the TIF article that the Reader just did, kind of a deep dive. If you haven't picked that up, it's got some interesting stuff. But so Larry's like quoting the Reader, talking about Aaron Feichtiger, and just talking about how TIF is dumb. And I went up and said sort of not the same thing, but just mostly Blackstone shouldn't be blighted. We hear about like census tracts. Is it going to be updated? Are we using the 2020 census data to determine that it's blighted or whatever? I think you should stop awarding TIF to Blackstone. Anyway, so then later Don Seaton walks by and he's like, hey, your point about, because of course the council doesn't say anything. They voted through 7-0, no problem, of course, duh. But after, I guess it was maybe after the meeting or after he was leaving.
After
Don
TIF,
Seaton,
it's like the TIF agenda items.
Yeah,
he got up in the middle of the meeting
fails.
and walked straight over.
Yeah, so he walks back to me. He's like, you know what? You made kind of a point that no one's, or maybe not no one's brought up, but like it was news to us. You have to basically get the council or the mayor to unblight an area. It's like, so Blackstone was determined, there was an ordinance that said Blackstone is blighted. We don't know what year exactly, but it was, probably decades ago. And until it specifically gets terminated, that ordinance, it'll be blighted forever. So it's not like we're just waiting for data to update for them to be like, okay, it's not blighted anymore. It's like, nope, it's just blighted forever.
And Don Seaton specifically said that the 2020 census numbers will not automatically update the community redevelopment areas.
Yeah.
And so the new data, it doesn't matter. But the one example I could find was TD Ameritrade, which is 113th and Old Mill, where the TD Ameritrade building is. They got TIF in 2012. It was controversial at the time. They got the award, paid it off in 2 years, and then the city council rescinded the TIF, specifically the blighted designation.
Yeah.
We're still kind of learning the terms, but Don Seaton agreed with Sarah. I was restating, he was like, I don't think Blackstone should be blighted either. And so we're in the process of figuring out how to specifically unblight a neighborhood or undesignate a blighted neighborhood, and put an end to TIF, because
not an end to TIF.
well,
I'm
an
not
end to
against TIF.
abuse.
I think TIF can be used as a tool smartly, and I think it's being abused, and that's what I would like to stop. And I think a lot of us would like to stop. And that's the thing, you know, like people have been standing up in front of city council for a long time now talking about TIF abuse, and they have not said jack shit about how they can actually do anything. They've said, oh, it's at the state, they do, you know, they define blighted. It's like, okay, well, someone locally can do something about determining whether or not an area is considered still blighted or not. So, and I think there was a little bit of like scuttlebutt between Begley and Fanslau, the planning director, at the beginning of the meeting. And we think that we overheard them saying something about Blackstone and being blighted. So what our plan is to just like get enough information from Don Seaton, maybe Bridget Hadley, also a big TIF person at the city, and then take like a softball, just lob it to Begley and be like, look, we know how this will work. You've said you're not really, you know, into having this Blackstone neighborhood considered blighted. Been hearing a lot of pushback. Don't let the developers turn the city into whatever they want while disregarding the needs of the residents. So we'll see. I don't know. It's hard to know, but that was what happened with TIF and Blackstone. All right. Any questions or comments or other ideas about TIF and how to defeat developers that abuse it?
I have a question. I actually am in a supposedly blighted area,
Yeah.
but they told me it would not affect my property value.
Yeah. I think that, and that's, I think the point is like, you know, we've seen at City Hall before where a developer will just come up and be like, can you make this area blighted so that I can get TIF later, basically. And so again, it doesn't really have to do so much. I mean, it's good to hear that you heard that verbatim, that it won't affect your property values, because we want to make sure that like all of the potential like scary things about blight or not blight are being, you know, able to be addressed. But yeah, what was the question? Maybe I missed the question. Just start getting excited about blight, just that it won't affect your property values.
Yeah, that was the thing during the TD Mayor trade, why they canceled that TIF, was there was complaints from the neighborhood about that exact thing. But yeah, I don't know if it's used. I don't think that's used in real estate evaluations. I feel like it's always trying to keep it going up. But
I always wondered like what, I think the issue of like TIF accountability and like, I mean, it's broken. It's, you know, I think a lot of people recognize that. Like what groups would make sense to advocate for its like fixing this? Like it feels like, you know, housing affordability groups, like the one that Erin works with, like that would be something they would be really interested in, because that money could be used for, I mean, yeah, like real affordable housing. Yeah.
The Chicago public schools came out strongly against TIF, and so they have a policy advocate that goes and analyzes this stuff and is a professional and says, no, this doesn't make sense, and this is why it's going to adversely affect, because a lot of the property do go to the schools. And so I know Chicago's the biggest example of that, but there's other public schools who have taken a stance and said, no, this is being abused and it's us.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I wonder like if they're like a group. Yeah, I don't know.
I know Brian Smith reached out to the OPS superintendent specifically back during, this would have been Crossroads TIF.
That was West Side.
Oh, was it West Side?
West Side,
That's their TIF. That's
Yeah.
where their property taxes go.
Yep.
And is it 50%, or does the public schools get?
I don't remember. It's
a lot.
significant.
I think they're the
yeah.
biggest, but also I know the Papio NRD's on there, Metro Community College.
Yeah. So we could just look at where all of the TIF gets redirected from, you know, and then just like see if we could identify some of those groups.
But OPS
was into
said
it.
no.
West Side.
They said West Side, the superintendent of the public school system, and I think even contacted like school board members, and they're all just like kind of neutral.
It's good for development. It's
yeah,
fine.
they, if anything, they leaned on the support it.
Mhm.
Go ahead and take the money from us. We don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like, yeah, Benson's point, education is needed. I just don't know like what group would lead the charge on putting that information together and like talking points and trying to like coalesce folks. But yeah, super badly needed. It's so broken.
It just seems like it's bizarre to me that it's been this long and no one has been like specifically tackling it, because it seems like something that we're every week we're like, dang it, more TIF abuse, nothing we can do, you know. And it's like, first of all, that's why those ding dongs sit up on the council, so that they can say, oh, we're not going to say yes to every single TIF request. We have to actually make sure it truly benefits the community and not just in a freaking economic fashion. That's what drives me so nuts about so much of this stuff, is they don't actually think about like the social impacts. They only think about the freaking dollars and cents of it. And then you can make an argument for a lot of stuff that doesn't actually make sense.
I know. I was thinking sort of pivoting to the Gold Coast 38th
Yeah,
and
we might as
Dodge
well.
demolition, because not only are they going to be demolishing
Occupied affordable housing
to build 150 units, they're also asking for TIF. And if you're familiar with TIF, there's this phrase, but for, is so the project could not go forward but for without TIF. And so I feel like if we can, this is like a dream, would be to torpedo their TIF application. And that would it would make it harder for them to move forward with the project. But for, I don't know, it's just an idea, but I also,
yeah, I mean, I think this was kind of the final straw with TIF for me, was like, okay, we continue to see this abused. Why, like, what else can we do about this? How can we, like, you know, unblight Blackstone or whatever? And yeah, I mean, ideally, this would be too slow of a moving situation to probably get this particular one done, but this could be the, like, you know, kind of the springboard, because there is a lot of people, you know, the East of 72nd guy, Ryan, was here last time. And there is like Restoration Exchange is interested in that particular, you know, 3 houses. And then, but just like Grace was saying, like trying to get a bigger coalition of like a lot of diverse opinions of why this is important, you know, from, I don't know, I think that there's possibility, but one more thing to organize. I don't have the capacity these days, but it seems like a great idea. So we just kind of talk about it here, and we all, like, you know, usually what Council Club is, we just kind of all brainstorm and then like touch base with our other networks and see, you know, if the idea sticks, and then we talk about it next time, or on Twitter and or on Slack and or however else we can email, keep talking. And
I do feel like that reader article, it seemed to get one layer deeper than even the World Herald article. It was, I think Sarah already said that Larry submitted it into record, literally gave a physical copy to the clerk. And Larry even said, like, the reader knows more about TIF than I do. And the reader is just like, kind of, and Anton was there, who's from the reader. But it's a good article about TIF. So I feel like step one is learning about it and being able to, and educating more and more people. So if you haven't read it, go check it out.
Yes. All right, cool. Feel like, okay. So there is a new testifier that spoke several times named Donny Johnson. He spoke really quickly, had an awesome wolf t-shirt on, and talked about how he was at the United Nations and Kay Orr sent him out of the country. Like, we didn't really know if he was like I don't know. I thought that he maybe had some sort of a situation, or maybe he was potentially like intoxicated or something, not to make light of, you know, his personality or whatever, but like, he was just kind of a character. And he was like, he said 2 different addresses. I think it was unintentionally, because actually Scott looked him up, and he is really with the Omaha Equestrian Foundation.
No, the Johnson Equestrian Foundation.
Johnson Equestrian Foundation
is a real thing. It's a real corporation, actually exists. And the address is the one that he gave, actually on 52nd Street.
So bizarre.
But I thought for sure he's going to get called out of order.
Yeah.
Like, he was almost in speaking in tongues.
Yeah, it was really quite something. And then he was talking about stuff that was not like germane to the agenda.
He talks about medical marijuana. We're like, okay, that's actually not bad, but
snuck that in there, guy. Yeah, it was kind of like, I think everyone was kind of in awe, or maybe I'll speak for myself. I was kind of in awe of his testimony, and I think maybe Festerson just like didn't either have the heart or the Like everyone was just fascinated. So he didn't get cut off. He just kind of kept going.
I wonder, so
Name dropped Betty Abbott, like a city councilwoman from a long time ago. Like he was just all over the place. It was really.
But Councilmember Johnson thanked him for coming. And so maybe she recognized them. Maybe the Johnson Equestrian Foundation, again, this is back, they were founded in 2001, I think. So maybe she remembers his heyday when he had horses.
Yeah.
On 52nd Street.
Yeah.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, cute. Very strange. Okay, so that was just, noteworthy to us.
And there was another person that spoke from the Omaha Nation.
Oh, yeah.
In a native language speaker, which at first I was just like, I thought again he's gonna get called out of order. Like, you speak American if you're, or you speak English. You speak in Native American.
Yeah, he was speaking Omaha.
Yeah.
It was really like, I almost was like kind of getting choked up. I don't know. It was an interesting reaction because I'm just like, oh my God, he's like thanking us for not, I don't know. It was just weird. It was for the reason he was speaking was in support of a like transitional sober house that and he was like, and here it is a Black lady that's going to help us. We've been asking for help and no one will help us. And here it is this Black lady. And it's on South 72nd, just a little bit south of Dodge, I guess. Anyway, so it's just a transitional home. And he was saying how, just grateful for the help and they need it, and spoke in Omaha. And it was really interesting. And he was on the tribal council before. And yeah, it was just kind of, so he's like commiserating with the council saying like, I understand kind of what you're doing. I was doing it myself. Yeah, just couple of fun new testifiers that we had not heard of before.
And so that was actually right after then another halfway house that got laid over.
Yeah.
Really?
So there was the one that was, you're right, first. It was kind of confusing because the applicant was like in her car zooming in from Denver, where I guess she lives, but she's trying to open a transitional home for women, which I thought was cool because she's like, so many of these halfway houses or transitional homes are for men. I really thought there was a need for one with, that was dedicated to women. So it's only going to be, I think, 6 women. It's not a huge one, it's like a small living permit is what she was there for. But, and she, she's like, I had a QR code on the flyers that I put around. And I contacted my neighbors and I tried to have a couple different meetings, but nobody ever came to the meetings, but they already know me and they know, because it sounded like it was already operational. I was a little confused about some of it, but anyway, Councilor Johnson voted to lay it over, which I was like, to
give time for the public to engage.
Yeah.
But it already sounds like.
Yeah. And the lady in the car was like, I already gave him like 3 different opportunities. Like, and I've reached out and I haven't gotten any negative, my phone number's everywhere. I haven't gotten a single angry, upset call. So I really don't know what's up with this process. Like, I did all the things that you wanted me to do and you're still not giving me this permit. But then she also said, Councilor Johnson, I understand, you're looking out for your neighborhood. So that's fine. I guess we'll talk further later, but that did get laid over.
But it wasn't a
7-0.
unanimous. Yeah. Harding and Melton voted against laying it over. They just like, let's just pass this. This is good to go. And I feel like that's not the first time they've kind of butted heads with Councilor Johnson over something in her district, in District 2, that she just wants another week. Was it the ballroom location? I feel like when they wanted the extra sidewalk.
Oh, yeah.
So and she's just like, I just want to lay it over for a week so I have more time for the public, for more public input.
Yeah.
And they're just like, why? They just like, let's just get it done now. And she's like, no. And I feel like Councilmember Roe voted with one of his freshman members, a fellow new member.
Yeah.
He's like, you know what? She wants an extra week. I'll give it to her.
Yeah.
But Melton and Harding were like,
nah.
And they were supportive of the halfway house, but they're just not supportive of Councilmember Johnson specifically in her needs.
Yeah. Anywho, so it got laid over.
Yep.
Then we definitely have Mark Brennan because he's radical. But Mark, yeah, exactly. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you brought up and your feelings about how it was received or not? Or if you're busy, that's cool too.
Specifically, the EPA violation by Swain Construction. Unfortunately, there, Mark.
He's probably putting kids to bed or something.
Yeah.
Well, he was awesome. And it was my favorite part when he was like, hopefully you're not only taking their campaign contributions, but you're also following up with them about what they're doing to remedy this EPA violation where they were like dumping rubble in streams and got fined for it. And there was no, of course, follow up, but it was,
the fine I think was about equal to the amount of the award we were about to like pay them. Like, here you go. Like, we just pay that directly to the EPA.
Yeah, you jerks.
Yeah.
Oh, Swain gives the mayor a ton of money, pretty much all the city council, their big campaign contributors.
Well, and I believe Mark said that Councilmember Melton's largest campaign contributor is Swain. And he pointed that out at city council, straight to her face. And I don't know. Yeah. So bravo, Mark. That was awesome.
You get a sticker.
Yes.
If we ever make them. All right.
Oh, and also do we talk about this on camera? How he also said, I read the agenda. I was planting garlic and had to take a break. So yeah, he plugged his business, talked about garlic and farming, and didn't get called out of order. So bravo, Mark. Well done.
Yep. All right. I think that's almost the end of that stuff. I guess the last item on the agenda for last Tuesday was the UNMC it's a total of like $93 million city commitment, but I spoke specifically in opposition to the 30 million allocated for parking garage. There were just plenty of reasons that I was unhappy about that. I brought this article, which I still have not emailed to the council like I told them I would. I will. But it's like about the high cost of free parking and how, environmentally it's a disaster and financially it's a disaster. And I just kept repeating $30 million. Like, I don't even know. I feel like when I get up there, sometimes I'm like so like full of rage. I like black out and don't even know what happens. But I feel like the point got across. $30 million is too much, especially on a flippin' transit line. It's in a TOD designation and right on the orbit line. And UNMC acts like they care about, health and whatnot. And then they're going to do this with our money. Whatever, it'll happen. I'm sure it'll pass. I just think it's important that if we're talking about, finally getting on board with the climate action plan, we need to start. And I intentionally brought the article that was 10 years old, talking about how 10 years ago, they already knew that building more parking is a bad idea. And so I said, since Omaha's always 10 years behind, I brought this article from 10 years ago so that you fucking, excuse my language, get it, but this is a bad idea and we should not. And they didn't vote yet, but they will, and it'll be passed with flying colors. My favorite part was when Kevin Anderson from the mayor's office stood up and was like, UNMC actually does a lot of, multimodal green, blah, blah, blah. And here's a picture of a bridge that's going to connect the Field Club Trail to UNMC. And I was like, and of course, I don't get a chance to go back up and rebut his bullshit because yes, that's proposed, but it's not a done deal. And so anyway, after council, I kind of chased him caught up with him before the escalators outside the chambers. And I was like, hey, congratulations. Like, that's cool that got funded, because I was under the impression that that's not a done deal yet. You're like kind of showing it like it is. And he's like, well, yeah, it's probably going to happen, but yeah, we don't have funding. And I was like, it seemed a little disingenuous to me that you would show this bridge like it's some sort of a like, no, look at these great things we're doing when you don't have the money for that. I guarantee that doesn't cost $30 million. And that would be a much more beneficial piece of infrastructure. But he was like, yeah, well, you're right. It isn't done, but I feel very confident that we're going to get it done. He's like, you have my word. And I was like, or what? Like, your word does not, you're not the, like, whatever. And he's like, you can pick the terms. And this hilarious, like, District 2 lady named Miss Shirley was there. And she's like, I heard him, Sarah. I'm going to hold you to that. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I heard that. So, it felt a little bit good for him to admit that he knew he was not, whatever. We'll see if any of it matters. But
and you got to respond on pretty much all of their talking points. So I don't, and actually, and I think it was in the news, maybe. I feel like I think in the reader. I think you were quoted in the reader. But we know that the city council rarely listens, and we already know how they're going to vote even before you say anything. But you got the mayor's office? Yeah, you got them to respond.
The economic development guy. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see.
Yeah.
So that triggered in my head. I'm like, man, we've been talking about this damn bridge over Leavenworth Street that would connect from the north end of the Field Club into UNMC for a very long time. So like, I just dug through some old emails, and I didn't go further back than 2017, but I did find, let me see, I pulled some quotes, because basically this extension over Leavenworth has been in the works since 1987. We still cannot justify funding something that has been in the works for decades. It was actually like some weird promise between this guy that we've been talking about this for a long time, but he used to work with the railroad somehow. And he said that when they were like banked the rail line. I don't even know what that means necessarily, but under the Nebraska Trails Council organization, which anyway, that area became the Field Club Trail. And they personally visited with the chancellor of UNMC, and he told us that if we dropped the rail banking on that line from Leavenworth to the northwest, that the university would include provisions for trail connection into the campus in the future. That meeting was about 1987. Anyway, it's just wild that like,
yeah, I wonder when that drawing was made.
The fancy one that Kevin Anderson
Yeah.
showed is like, you know, new and shiny, but the concept's not. And it's like, we just keep kicking the can down the road on so many of these things. And like, here's another one. But so the overall view for that whole area also, you know, I don't, excuse me, know if you've seen, oh my gosh.
So aren't there two bridges? Are you gonna talk about?
Yeah. So one goes from the Field Club north across into the UNMC campus. And then there's another one that's like a lid basically on Saddle Creek, which would be like a green connection between like their tower and stuff, the old steel mill casting site over into the main campus. So that would be a pedestrian and bike connection across Leavenworth and then Saddle Creek, and then into the old steel mill site, steel castings, to Howard, which they won't repave Howard. Howard is like a crucial bike connection. Right now, it's only from like 48th to, well, I take it all the way from 51st into Elmwood Park. So between 48th and 50th, really needs to be repaved. And again, not something that Stothert thinks needs to be done. Another connection that has been in the works and talked about for a long time. And again, they're dropping the ball on all this bike infrastructure and making excuses for decades. I'm so sick of it. Okay.
You did good though.
You did. Really, thank you. I was glad that I said something, just because I think sometimes I feel like I wish that they understood that we're paying attention, you know, and I don't know how many emails they need to get. I don't know how many handwritten letters they need to get. I don't know how many people they need to hear testify before they actually change anything, but it seems like it's hard to know what works. Cindy just wrote Council Bluffs. Okay, another great point. Council Bluffs is smoking us. Like, they're leaving us in the dust, and it's Council Bluffs. Omaha should be embarrassed of that. No offense, Council Bluffs, but like, usually you're not as cool as Omaha. Omaha thinks it's cool and progressive and getting stuff done, but Omaha is still arguing about pilot projects when Council Bluffs is building permanent infrastructure that's legit and safe and protected and well done. Their First Avenue project is what we're talking about. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. We're going to try to do a spring bike ride with one of the planners over there who's kind of behind the project with Mode Shift, I think, hopefully in the spring. So that'll be cool to just kind of get a tour of that infrastructure and help us dream about what we could see here.
Is it a protected bike lane?
It's like a whole separated path trail thing. Yeah, it's legit.
Wow.
Cindy, you want to say anything about it?
You moving to Council Bluffs, Cindy?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. No, yeah, because what I was actually going to say was, as I was looking up this on First, their podcast, I was thinking, does our mayor or any of our planning departments or public works have a podcast? Okay.
Well, she's been the Chris.
I mean, that's the joke of the night, right?
Yeah.
And then also their website is so freaking easy. And I'm thinking, is this because Council Bluffs is so much smaller? And I don't know if you saw my latest tweet, but you know what? Council Bluffs has a mayor for the people. We have a mayor for the money.
Yep.
And it's so striking, the difference. And so I think that, you know, while I really appreciate what you all are doing, and I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but man, it's like beating your head against the wall sometimes. So yeah. I'm thinking that we're just going to have to wait until she like leaves office. How many years is that?
3.5. Who's counting? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, maybe some way we can really hopefully start to facilitate a change. Because what about Councilman Roe? You can go with that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good segue. I was invited. Did we talk about this last week?
No,
I don't think so. So I got an email from Councilor Roe asking if I wanted to ride the Harney Street bike lane with him. And so he actually had a bike ride set up with Benny from Heartland BCycle to take an e-bike tour on the Harney Street lane, Don Roe and his wife Marcy. And so it was so funny. I guess Don Roe reached out to Benny and was like, is it okay if I invite Sarah? I guess not everybody likes her. And I'm like, cool, thanks, counselor. And Benny and I are like old friends. So Benny was like, yeah, of course, invite Sarah. That's like, I see her all the time. Yeah, it's good. So I was invited, and I pretty much rode with Marcy, his wife, and Benny and Don rode, and we were on e-bikes. And the coolest part was, so like right when we get into the bike lane, we started, City Hall's at like 19th and Harney. So we're facing east, where our plan is to go to 10th, turn around, ride all the way to Dewey Park, and then back to City Hall. So we get into the lane, and Benny's kind of like explaining, just a little bit about how it works. And a delivery driver pulls up and parks in the lane. And I was like, oh, there you go. Check that out. Cause like, obviously that's a huge problem that happens all the time. And Don Roe was like, oh, what? Oh, someone's parked in there? And I'm like, yeah, man, pretty typical. Glad you're seeing it. Like, thank you for being appalled at this. You're right. That's the right reaction. We should get angry. Like, this is bad infrastructure. If it was how it was designed originally, which would be like a median separated concrete planter and then parked cars and then the moving traffic, that would be a lot less of an issue. And he's like, oh, taking pictures of it. I just thought it was so cute. I was like, who are you going to send that to, man? Like, we send in pictures all the time. No one fucking cares. But now you see it, and maybe now you will understand that it's important to have safer infrastructure. So that was kind of cool. They enjoyed the electric bikes, and
I think Don Roe is now officially the highest ranked elected official in Omaha that's been on the Harney Street bike lane. Like
Pete Festerson has.
He's written it?
Yeah,
okay.
Because Benny has been asking other people, and the only other person that did it was Pete.
Oh,
so yeah, so Pete and Don Roe have so far. Amy Melton says she doesn't ride bikes in November, even though it was 70 degrees the other day. But I guess they're all going to do it in the spring. So hopefully that's true.
Oh, nice.
We shall see. Okay, speaking of City Hall.
Quick note on Don Roe.
Yeah.
I think an issue that everybody needs to press him on is that his district, there is no library. There is not one of his constituents has a library.
Wow.
It's been in the CIP. It's already been approved. The Southwest branch, the 13th branch. And so if he wants to prove that, let's get some action on that, because that's something that's a fact. He knows it's a fact. And in this whole library mess, that's getting glossed over. But his constituents are paying the same amount of property taxes as everybody else, but they're not receiving the same amount of services. And if you frame it like that, it doesn't look so good for a conservative like him. And also, he's a proponent of missing middle, but his votes so far have not aligned with that. Like, as far as the Keystone developer that they railroaded, and then also he switched his vote on that other one. So he's a developer. I mean, he's pro developer because he still works at Millard Lumber. Like, that's who he rubs elbow with. But so we need to hit him on the library issue.
That makes sense. Yeah. No, and that's what I mean. I have kind of a library, on my radar a little bit too, because a few more people have just reached out with like how appalled they are that the last article that came out was basically just like, moving right along, we're building something at Due Space. It was just so bizarre how it kind of like brushed over all of the public input that they just got, and makes it kind of sound like a done deal, which we already knew it was. But again, to Mark's point, like, this other branch has been in their priorities since 2017. This is not a new concept. They just, again, keep kicking the can down the road, and they do whatever they want. And then they act like they tried to get public feedback because the libraries had public sessions, but that's not who's actually making the decisions, because they're not the ones who even knew about it.
And it's small decisions too. If you say, okay, we don't have the funds for it right now, well, Mayor Stother lowered the property tax levy, and all the councilors voted for it. Well, guess what? Me as a homeowner, I'm paying $15 less per year, but I would rather have the kids out there in his district have books to read.
Yeah.
So those are the decisions you make. So it's a yes or no. He needs to make a better decision, a more informed decision on that vote, because who cares? Because property tax relief disproportionately it benefits people who have, right? Me I own a $150,000 house. I'm saving $15 a year. But somebody who owns multiple properties, or developers who are giving you big checks, they own so many more properties, and the value on those properties are so much higher that it makes a big difference for them. But guess what? The kids still don't have books to read.
Yeah, that one seems so absurd to me that they're reprioritizing stuff despite what their studies say. That's what freaking drove me bonkers too when they're talking about the UNMC, like, we're going to do another parking study. It's like, here's a study from 10 years ago saying it's a bad idea. Like, we already did a study about these libraries. The community wants a flippin' Millard library. That's been in the works for 4 years. And somehow now that's just like not even being talked about. I don't understand. And again, that's another one of those things. It's like in and out of the CIP with no discussion. Oh, that is a problematic document in and of itself. But yeah, no, I think that there are some like strategic things that we could continue to help him like understand too, because so he asked Don Roe, invited me to coffee, a month or 2 months now. I don't even know what time it is, but anyway, and was just kind of like, I think we're not seeing eye to eye on some stuff. So he's making a point to try to listen. So I'm happy to try to keep, having conversations with him and make those points. Cause Mark, I didn't realize that it was all like his whole district doesn't have a library.
And he rode the Orbit. He took the Orbit to City Council, or City Hall one day.
I challenged him to ride the Orbit, and he actually did it. He
so drove to West Roads,
me after
did the parking ride.
Yeah,
but all because of Oh, and speaking of all because of this beautiful woman, she got recycling at City Hall outside. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's such a silly thing because it's like, why the hell aren't there recycling bins outside by the trash cans at City Hall? Because it's Omaha. But
we go to City Hall Tuesdays at 2. We usually get there around 1:30 or 1 o'clock
and eat lunch.
Eat lunch at these little benches outside, and we have like usually a lot of like paper waste that could be recycled.
I always bring a LaCroix. I'm like, I want to freaking recycle my can and I have to take it home to recycle. And I know it's just one can or whatever, but then I'm like, on principle, why the hell isn't the city county building setting the standard? Like, of course we recycle. Of course, if there's a trash can, there's a recycling bin. Like, it's 2021. Yeah, we just talking about climate, not doing jack shit about it. Anyway, so I think I brought it up on Twitter, and then Jim Tyler, who works in public works, reached out to me, like DM'd me. He's like, hey, that's not actually a city.
Yeah, but not at city county.
It's not public works. And I was like, okay, well then who is it? He's like, it's the county building administrator. And I was like, okay, can you put me in touch? So got in touch with this guy. His name's Paul. Emailed him. He's like, what, you want recycling bins outside? And I was like, yeah, by the trash cans. It should be where all the trash cans are. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to be out of town and I'll look into it when I get back. And then I never heard back. And so I was like, of course, they dropped the ball. I email him. He's like, yeah, our vendor says they should be in next week and we'll have them installed by December 1st. And I was like, what the hell? That's a tiny thing. But
we're going to have a ribbon cutting.
Scott's like, we're having a ribbon cutting on the recycling.
I wanted to put a little stencil, Sarah Johnson Memorial Recycling Container, invite Jim Tyler and the county guy, Paul.
Yeah. Well, I
think
make
a big deal about it.
Yeah. Well, make it look, like that's a big deal because they're too dumb to think of it on their own. Like, what are we doing? We're talking about climate action plan. We don't need to come up with another plan. We need to implement someone else's at this point. Like, we're so late in the game, it's ridiculous. But yeah, I guess the fact is they're finally talking about it. So maybe talk.
And we're learning. We're getting good contacts with people at the county, at the city, and we're sharing this knowledge. So it's baby steps, but
doing what we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a weird thing to get excited about, but I was like, I think we got recycling at City Hall. You got to get excited sometimes about the little things, otherwise you totally lose your mind, I suppose.
So speaking of recycling, so there is no meeting next Tuesday. Usually we have these meetings on Thursday because the agenda comes out. No agenda came out today. The next meeting is going to be November 23rd. And you can look ahead in the agenda, or the current agenda, you can look ahead at non-action items for what's coming up. And I saw First Star Fiber is going to be talked about in 2 weeks, or the 23rd. Specifically, Nebraska land recycling. I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was October. It was actually on my birthday. So October of 2020. There was a big kerfuffle about giving Nebraska land. Was it a 10-year contract? Yeah, something absurd, over $30 million over 10 years for a recycling processor that had just started. And for those of you that don't know about First Star Fiber, they are awesome. They employ disadvantaged people, and so not only are they a good employer, they're doing a good job. they pioneered the orange bag thing. They're part of the orange bag project, rotating plastic. Anyways, super awesome. So looking at the agenda item, Nebraska Land did not submit the paperwork in time. And the mayor's office was specifically quoted in a WWT article that they didn't fill out their documents in time. So they're not even going to, the recycling contract is automatically going back to First Star. So for the last 10 months, we've been sort of in limbo. We've been taking stuff back and forth. And so, yeah, this is going to be awesome. I feel like they're going to give them, the city is going to give Nebraska Land like one final chance to lowball, because they always have to go with the lowest bid. But as it stands on the current agenda, it's just it's being awarded to First Star Fiber, and it says Nebraska Land failed to submit. I don't know, it's just music to my ears.
Satisfying. Yeah. It's because like kind of felt like they were not the right ones, but of course they just wanted whatever's cheap. Even though if you know, there's all these like service change orders that you see a lot at city council, and it's because the low baller sometimes doesn't know what they're talking about and or needs to make amendments to whatever they said they could do, and it ends up being more money anyway. So I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. But seemed like kind of good news.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow, it's almost everything on our notes.
Yeah. What else is going on? Oh, I guess let me scroll down again.
Oh, this thing.
Yeah, just so a little bit more about like the I don't really know how much I should say about this, but the Market to Midtown Bikeway, the Harney Street pilot project, there's like some data that has just come out about 132% increase in usage, but it's kind of, so yeah, I shouldn't probably say all this, but we're fact checking some of their data, and it seemed through that.
I want to ask about that, or maybe afterwards, or whatever you want to talk.
Yeah.
Isn't that just from BCycle estimation for like BCycle data? That's all the data they have, right?
Well, they were doing counts, like they had a volunteer physically out there counting at one point.
And
but
the little bubble counters or tube counters.
Yeah, but some of those counters have been sabotaged, and then they had like only one laptop that they like was broken, and so they couldn't access the data. And so then they were trying to do just like hand counts and then extrapolating not an annual average, but then they use like data they found from like a day count and then decided that was, and it's not great, unfortunately.
I think the way I understand it is they are trying to because there's an increased ridership in the warm months and a decreased ridership in the winter. And so the colder the months, and the study started, or I'm sorry, the bike lane opened in July, a summer month. So there's going to be a lot of ridership, but even as it's getting colder, I think they adjusted the numbers for, even though it's colder, more people are riding.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, we're going to be following up on, I mean, that's what's kind of cool is ModeShift applied for a grant through Spin. This is our second Spin grant of the year. High five, ModeShift. But this one is for Spin data tools. And so we're going to be able to actually kind of fact check what Bike Walk and Metro Smart Cities thinks they're coming up with. So although we were also told that it doesn't matter what our data says, it only matters what Metro Smart Cities says. And so they kind of like patted us on the head and told us we were cute for trying to like pay attention to data. So good times there. But the thing with Don Roe, riding with him and his wife, he seemed to like get it, like that's what's really important, I think, is to get some of these decision makers out using the infrastructure. And then it's totally different when you're not just looking at a picture of it, you're actually interacting with it and you're saying, oh, wow, okay, that is kind of weird that you have to read signs by the pedestrian crosswalk as a person on a bike. There's just like some weird glitchy stuff that needs to be addressed if and when, I'm going to say when it becomes permanent. And at the end of our ride, Don Roe was like, so do you want like this to go farther west, or like, do you want another bike lane or whatever? And I was like, yeah, both. We need it to be like a safe, protected, connected network of bike lanes. You would never just build one road for people on cars. Like, here's your one road. You better drive on it a lot to prove to us that, you really need it. And then it's like, oh, well, guess what? The road doesn't flip and connect to anything. Where am I going to drive? And that's what they're kind of telling us to do with this piece of bike infrastructure, which is like protected, but not to the extent that it should be, as we talked about earlier, you know, with like delivery drivers parking in it nonstop. That's a huge issue.
There was a cute exchange that you told me about with Marcy, Don Roe's wife.
Oh yeah.
About she asked, because you rode, you know, I think it's 5 miles to City Hall from where we live, and she was like, well, what trail do you like to ride on? And you're like, I ride the street.
Yeah, I don't ride trails so much. The trails don't go where I need them to go, really. Like I ride for transportation. You know, I told her that this was basically my car and that my partner and I share a car and we both have electric bikes. And she's like, wow, it was just kind of cool to talk with her because she already does ride bikes, and she was great actually, because she's like, I'm always telling Don, we need better bike stuff in Omaha. We need better bike trails. We need, you know, because also with the pandemic, there's a huge increase in trail use. And so just imagine if people felt safe using something other than trails, you know, it would be bigger than just trail use. So a lot of work to do as per usual, but I was just grateful that Roe was interested in saying, yeah, let's go ride bikes in December with my wife. We'll check it out. So
yeah,
could have been worse. All right. Does anybody else have anything else that they want to bring up? All right, cool. I'm going to hit stop recording and then we will chat a little bit further. Oh, I always almost hit end, and I don't mean to do that. I mean to hit stop recording. All right, thank you.